Good morning, class, or afternoon, or whatever the time might be for you. It's morning for me. But this is the video lecture for chapter 27, entitled Sounding Spring, Vivaldi and the Baroque Concerto. So this is our first chapter that I have the genre for program music. And let's see if I can do the whiteboard here. Bear with me. Okay, so this chapter is actually from the Baroque period of time. Remember the dates for the Baroque? 1600 to 1750, right? Remember we said that in 1600 is the invention of opera. And this is important because it's directly related to the chapter here on the concerto. And of course, we say 1750 is when Johann Sebastian Bach died. But the opera is, in essence, it's solos and the orchestra, right? Or everybody sings. So it's big and small, big and small. And it was the avant-garde music, and it influenced all other kinds of music, including instrumental music. So opera involves and uses the voice, and so does the cantata and the oratorio. But as instrumental development was the concerto. And before the orchestra, before the opera performed, there was a piece of music played called the overture. And the overture developed into lots of different things, but a standalone piece is the concerto, all right? So let's go back and stop sharing this now. And let's go to the PowerPoint. So when did the concerto actually start? First year? I don't know, but by the late Baroque, it's in full force, right? Baroque musicians developed the concerto, a genre that generally featured either a solo instrument or a small group of soloists set against a larger ensemble. It's very much in the style of opera, as far as small against large. And first and last, the concertos typically have three movements, and it's set fast, slow, fast. And I'll probably say that several times during this lecture. The first and the last movements, concertos, tended to follow a refrain-based structure known as ritornello form. Remember, we listened to the Bach cantata, and we kept referring, you say, well, there is the ritornello, there is a ritornello. And then when we did the opera, the first opera we listened to that I had an example from Monteverdi, I kept saying, well, there's the ritornello, there's your ritornello. They keep, so you have that melody that's it's consistent, and then you have, for instance, like the voices, and then the melody that's consistent keeps coming back again. So this same thing happens in instrumental music. And in the concerto, this is a common way of the small against the large, and then this melody that keeps coming back. So Antonio Vivaldi, the composer we're going to sample, was a virtuoso violinist, and he composed a piece of music called The Four Seasons. And it's a very famous piece of music. You go to Amazon and look at CDs, you probably find 15 to 20 different recordings, different versions of the same piece of music. It's, and what it is, they're violin concertos, and it's like one of the first major examples of program music. I think there was program music before this, and it's not the only program music, but it is program music. And so what is program music? We're going to discuss, because this is the whole genre we're initiating here, is music that is instrumental, but it tells a story. So the Four Seasons is, you guessed it, winter, spring, summer, and fall. And each one of those seasons is a concerto by itself. So each one of those seasons has three movements: a fast, slow, fast. Okay, in reference to ritornello, right, from the Italian word ritornare. which means to return, right? A melodic idea that returns periodically, a musical refrain. Okay, now a concerto, right, consists of one or more instrumental soloists accompanied by and sometimes pitted against the body of the orchestra. So this is what the thing, small, big. And by the High Baroque, right, we refer to the late period, 1700, 1750, the concerto had become the single most important genre of orchestral music. Hundreds of concertos were written by dozens and dozens of composers all over Europe, Italy, Germany, France, England, yes. Okay, now there are basically three types in concerto, and we're going to focus on the piece of music that is a solo concerto, meaning it's for solo instrument versus orchestra, even though it's not in this case. And then the other types of concerti are an orchestral concerto that there is no soloist, and it's really for orchestra. And then there's a concerto grosso meaning large, so that this solo is not an individual, but it's a group. So you have this small group versus the orchestra. That's a concerto grosso. And again, three types of concerti. And by the way, yeah, concerto, plural, is concerti, right? In Italian, and this is an Italian word. O is singular, and I is plural, like tempo and tempi. I could say probably ritornello and ritornelli. So ripieno concerto. Let me read what it is. Solo concerto features a single soloist accompanied by and perhaps pitted against the orchestra. And then the concerto grosso, right? Means the big or grand concerto features two or more soloists, typically 3 or 4. So that's the idea, right? We have the whole orchestra with no soloist, no particular soloist, except the violins, right, play the melody. And then here, so you would in effect have the violin section versus the orchestra. There you go. And here, one versus the orchestra, and a small group versus the orchestra. These are famous composers. Bach wrote a number of concerti, right? I told you he wrote his Brandenburg Concerto. He wanted to get a job outside the church, and he tried to get a job at the city of Brandenburg, and he wrote 6 concerto, each 3 movements, concertis, and he submitted them, and he did not get the job. But those considered perfect examples of concerti today, the Bach Brandenburg concertos. You should check those out. And here are terms that we use when we're talking about concerto. Tutti, meaning all the players, including the soloists. Ripieno refers to the orchestra, but not the soloists. And the concertino refers to the soloist in a concerto grosso. So you either have a soloist or a concertino, which is the small group, right? And then the ripieno would mean the orchestra without the soloist. And tutti means everybody. Okay, so typically we're going to expect a ritornello form in the first movement and the third movement, and those are fast, and the middle movement is slow. We use the word adagio. So concerto developed in Italy, so I guess they can claim that they use the word concerto, an Italian word. Here we reference those 6 Brandenburg concertos I mentioned to you. And Vivaldi is the concerto king from Venice. Venice. Where is Venice? Well, let's take a look. Okay, do you have a second? Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Venice. Italy, right? Venice over here. This part of Italy, because Italy did not become a country until the late 1800s. This was part of the Austrian Empire, actually, and they probably spoke Italian, but nevertheless, the government was Austrian. And Venice is that city of canals. There's St. Mark's Cathedral there. So it has a long history of music in Venice. Matter of fact, maybe Monteverdi worked there. Okay, let's go back. Let's go to the PowerPoint again. Here is Antonio Vivaldi, of course, with the wig. So the birth and death date, 1678 to 1741, compared to Bach, right? Bach died in 1750, and Bach was born in 1685. So just a little bit before Bach, pretty much contemporaries, I would say. So Vivaldi is considered the father of the concerto. He wrote over 500 concertos, concerti, wow, 230 for solo violin. He wrote sinfonias, he wrote operas, and other vocal music. Very prolific composer. And he actually worked at a girls' school, and I think I mentioned to you this before when we talked about Barbara Strozzi in that chapter, that it was a perfect and common alternative for women to where they could go to join a convent and do something that was academic, perhaps, right, or for a cause rather than just be married and be pregnant for 18 years. Anyway, so this girls' orphanage where Vivaldi worked was a very famous orchestra, and incidentally, they had to perform behind a screen. This is the way it was done at the time. So again, we're going to sample the Four Seasons. Here is a concert by the girls of one of Venice's famous ospedali or orphanages, right? By the painting by Gabriel Bella. So Vivaldi taught music at the most prestigious of these institutions. Here you have the women up here, right? And I would say this is the audience over here. I don't see any instruments, so it must be a choir, right? Here is a typical Baroque period painting, right? 1576, 1622, early, right? Late Renaissance, perhaps. The theorbo, right? Big long lute, a guitar, different instruments, different family. And what else do we have here? Violin and music. And what's this guy doing? I don't know. All right. So Vivaldi, we're going to sample the concerto from the Four Seasons entitled Spring, La Primavera, very famous piece of music. And I'll try and point out, because we say it's program music. What is program music? Music that tells a story, right? And here, each one of the seasons tells the story of that season. So spring has this section called Birds. And it's undeniable that it sounds like birds, right? If you just implant that in your brain, and you hear these trills and high running scales, and then there's a storm section and the florid violin passage, right? So anyway, we'll try and point out those sections. Overload. Okay, I think this performance, and incidentally, we're going to see Itzhak Perlman, who was in El Paso just a short while ago, right? And some of you may have seen the concert with him. So here he is, a little bit younger, and he is conducting. Now, this is typical of a concerto where you did not have one conductor, but the soloist would be the conductor, and so he is. And this is the first movement. I'll point out those sections of the birds and the storm, etc. Here we go. Okay, before we start the second movement, Vivaldi provides this text, right, that goes with it. And for the first movement, the text says, "Joyful spring has arrived. The birds greet it with their cheerful song, and the brooks in the gentle breezes flow with a sweet murmur. The sky is covered with a black mantle, and thunder and lightning announce a storm. When they fall silent, the little birds take up again their melodious song." And it's pretty clear because he has it right above the music where this is supposed to take place, and it's no doubt that that's what his intention is. The second movement is largo, which means slow. And here, the description is, "And in the pleasant flowery meadow, to the gentle murmur of bushes and trees, the goat herd sleeps, his faithful dog at his side." And I want to play just part of this because, well, I want you to listen to the viola that has this part that, right above the music, Vivaldi writes, "barking dog." So you can imagine out in the meadow with your goat herd, and the goat herd is sleeping, but the dog nevertheless is doing his job, and he is just in a gentle bark, right? So it's like boom, 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 boom. Anyway, you hear that. Listen for that. Here we go. Second movement, largo. There are three movements to the whole piece of music, and in a text, they have us listening to the first movement only. Remember, concerto, solo versus the orchestra. Three movements, fast, slow, fast. That concludes chapter 27, Antonio Vivaldi and the Concerto.